Welcome to part 3.
We're back! Part 3! Okay, right, so I wanted to talk about briefly the fact that David Cronenberg is a diehard, hardcore atheist.
Sensible man.
Very sensible man. But I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic because Carl Sagan is also, and it's good enough for me. So I just think this is a really important thing to talk about because it kind of explains his viewpoint on life. Okay, now I saw him in an interview and this guy was like, the interviewer was like, well, why are you so drawn to the dark side of life? And Cronenberg was really quite like, no, it's not dark. Are you kidding me? Like, for real? He said, I think my films aren't dark. I'm not drawn to darkness. I'm drawn to realness. And that's exactly how I feel about his films. I don't find them dark. I find them realistic because I'm totally an existentialist. I've been forever. And with a little bit of absurdity thrown in there because you don't want to, and it's a nice kind of absurdism. It's like
an absurd existentialist.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, I'm like a Camus kind of existentialist, not a Sartre one, because just want to hang yourself if you're into Sartre. It's so bleak.
Nausea.
Yeah, but when you're an atheist, when you're an existentialist, the fact of the matter is you just know that you're going to die and that's it. And so it puts you in a certain mindset. Well, this is how Cronenberg said it. He said, my films aren't about the darker side of life. Absolutely not. It's the realistic side. If you're an existentialist, it means that you're accepting death as a reality, and oblivion as a reality, and non-existence as a reality. These are very, very hard things for people to accept, understandably. And so to me, is that the dark side? No, it's the realistic side, And how do you absorb that? And then he goes on to say, it's really about the human condition, and that's the subject of all art. An examination of the human condition from whatever perspective you happen to have. So let's not hear any more about his films being dark. For people like me that have had to accept my own mortality from a very early age, and unfortunately or fortunately, I don't have the personality. I'm too curious, I'm too mystically minded, or too full of questions to accept the religion I was brought up with. I respect it, but I just don't really believe that anything was going to happen to me under death. I'd like something nice to happen, but I don't expect it. And to be honest, I've raised my children in the same way, and it doesn't ruin people to know that the most likely scientific thing to happen once you die is you're dead and that's it. And actually, I think it helps you live a lot easier because if you're dead and you don't know it, it's okay. It's just like, it's not even like a sleep. There's just nothing. So I don't think there's anything to be scared of. But Cronenberg is kinder about how other people are and how they think. And he says that it's hard for people to accept these sort of things. And I guess not everyone's in this sort of headset where I accepted that very young. Well, I kind of had to. I was either like, I believe in God and heaven and hell, or I believe that I have a certain limited amount of life and I might die very young. So it put me into a sort of headspace that is compatible with seeing Cronenberg's films as indeed being realistic instead of dark. And I deeply appreciate artists that show that realism, that aren't afraid to do that. And I suppose in a way, it turns out it's very risky and a lot of people can't hack it, they don't appreciate it, and it scares them. Doesn't scare me. And so this is one of the reasons, we both love him so much and we appreciate what he does because he's not afraid to be real and express the way he sees things. And I find that really comforting. His films are immensely comforting to me and just warm. They're so warm, and I don't see them as dark. I just see them as just interesting and like we're talking about realism here, but there's some really bizarre things that happen. But life is bizarre. Let's face it, it's very odd. Quantum physics is odd. We can't explain everything that happens, and it's just another big reason. I just thought it was important to say why he doesn't see his films as like, he doesn't believe in the body horror, he believes in body beauty, which is where we go into Dead Ringers, because there's an amazing line. There's this amazing line in the film where one of the doctors says, I think that there should be beauty pageants for the inside of people's bodies, the most perfectly formed kidney, the ideal spleen, and we love that concept because I don't like the idea of external beauty contests. I'm like, ugh, what's that all about? It's just so, but the idea of like an inner beauty competition. And then, of course, in Crimes in the Future, they really get into that concept, which was just so exciting. So, yeah, you can see where these ideas are getting developed over the decades. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for Cronenberg, I think.
Oh, it really is.
Such a good performance by Jeremy Irons as well. He was in
one of the greatest performances, like, ever, in a lot of ways. Just... Sorry.
Amazing. It kind of like, it was done later, similar thing technically was done in a film called Adaptation with Nicolas Cage, which I think did win an Oscar, but this film did not win an Oscar. But Jeremy Irons was in a really, really good film called A Reversal of Fortune the year after this, and he did win the Oscar for that. And I think one of the first people he thanked when he got on stage was David Cronenberg, because he really did help him with that, giving him that role, I think.
I do think that the only reason he didn't get an Oscar for that was because the film was too weird, and the Oscar people were like, no, we can't reward a film this bizarre, we can't possibly do that, even though the performance was like absolutely incredible. So I think they almost like just gave him that Oscar to sort of acknowledge that, that performance in Dead Ringers was amazing, which is weird how they do that, but they do that sometimes. So yeah.
So the technique they use is called computer controlled moving matte photography. It's quite a new thing at the time.
It's so flawless.
It is. It really is.
You never believe for a second that there's not two Jeremy Irons, which kind of really messes with your head.
Yeah,
like even when I tried to watch it thinking this is one man doing two scenes, I just couldn't. He's just, that technical side of it, the movie magic side of it is just flawless. You cannot tell. You cannot.
Yeah, that's great.
No.
Another really good performance in this film by Genevieve Bujold.
Yeah, she's really interesting. She's good in this.
Very interesting character.
Very unusual character to have as like a woman. It's a bit like so David Lynch and Lars von Trier and Cronenberg, they all have like, people complain about how they're like, they just have all these wounded, grotesque sort of like things happening to women, whatever. The sort of roles that these women get to play are so interesting and complex and different, and they're so strong. I don't know any weak women in his films. They all have these really intense strengths, and she is very much, you kind of think of like her as being like a character that's trying to help one of the brothers, but I think her help harms more than anything else. Like,
yeah, I don't know if help's the right word.
None of them are really without great flaw. Yeah, which is really nice to see that complexity.
Yeah, definitely.
It's actually based on a true story.
The Mantle twins.
The Mantle twins. Well, the real twins were called Cyril and Stuart Marcus, and they were two twins who were both obstetricians, and they did. One would be doing a gynecological procedure on a woman, and then he get his brother to come in and sort of finish it off. And they did, on occasion, lose their minds completely and yell at patients, and were quite strange. They did live together, and they were found dead together in 1975 in their shared apartment for kind of unknown reasons, but there definitely was a lot of barbiturate abuse in their relationship, like a lot. But it was very weird how they died, because one of them did seem to have died of a drug overdose, they think, and then the other twin kind of stayed alive and left the apartment and came back and then died a few days later, and they're not quite sure how he even died. And there's a lot of reference to this very famous Siamese twins, these Chinese Siamese twins. One used to drink more than the other, and they were connected their whole lives, and one morning the twin wakes up and his other twin is dead. Like, what is that like to have your dead twin attached to you? So that's something that's definitely been incorporated into the story, but sadly there's not very much known about these twins, and they're not very interesting. Actually, they were pretty unremarkable, except for like when it was found out that they had operated under the influence of drugs. The hospital, and in fact the hospital field in general, was forced to reevaluate their practices, and because they kind of tried to take no responsibility for what happened. And they did, like the characters in the movie, actually invent they wrote some amazing articles, and they wrote some amazing texts, and they actually kind of made some really big advancements. So they were certainly very smart, very connected to each other, but we know nothing about their relationships.
There's a book about them.
There's a whole book.
I don't think hopefully the new series uses that more.
That would be good. I mean, like little details, like for what we know what they used to dress like as children, that's very well depicted. So I think everything I could kind of find out about the twins is in the film, but then there's a lot of creative license taken, which is great.
Yeah.
But the concept itself is pretty like out there, really.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, from what we've been saying, there's a lot of surgical stuff in it, but and dream sequences, nightmare sequences, and things. But Cronenberg has been careful to say that he does think of this film as his first sort of foray into drama, sort of a more serious kind of film. It's not like a sci-fi film, really.
No, it's not. Because the twins died in 1975, which is, and the movie was made in the late 80s?
87, I think.
Yeah.
Or 88 actually. So yeah, it was probably shot in 87. But it's a very melancholic, sad sort of film as well. I mean, it's the ending of the film. God. The score as well. I think it's the like around the point where I started to get like really excited with Howard Shore's scores, because this one is just so beautiful and so sort of memorable. There's also, we watched a film for our Paul Schrader reviews that we did recently, Autofocus. That's a score that kind of gradually gets more and more bleak, and this is quite similar. It reminds me, especially those scenes in the apartment towards the end.
It disintegrates along with the
totally.
Characters. Oh, and actually, the apartment, what I know about the twins is that they lived in absolute squalor towards the end. In fact, there was a chair covered in feces that they used to just go to the toilet on, apparently. So all of that, really, really gross. So, yeah, the state of the apartment.
That's what happens when you get addicted to drugs. You don't really care about things like that as much.
There's a line that I really, really like in this film that one of the brothers is saying, like, I don't like taking drugs, but he said, but then the only drugs that I'll take are for pain. Pain creates character distortion. It's simply not necessary. And man, that's so interesting. In fact, I do think that line, because I've seen this film a lot of times over my life, helped me finally allow myself to take painkillers, because for a really long time I thought, I don't want to be on painkillers,
but the paradox with that,
but the pain was causing a character distortion.
I know,
it was making me imagine trying to prepare a meal for your children while you're in excruciating agony.
I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm saying when you take it also creates a character distortion as well.
I think also it depends how much you take, what you take. I don't think it changes my character that much, to be honest. I'm just not as much in pain. But then I'm very, very, very careful about my dosages and not increasing them, and it's a very, very tricky.
I'm saying it more in response to Jeremy Irons' character.
Right? Yeah. No,
not so much about you.
But. Yeah, but I think that like a lot of little things in Cronenberg's films, lines like that, have helped me lean into accepting things that have actually really helped me psychologically and physically. And I don't know, but that line there was the reason I went, fine, I am going to start taking painkillers, and now I can just function a lot better. And I haven't gotten addicted, I haven't abused them. Sometimes I want to, but I know I can't, because I want them to freaking work when I'm in pain. So yeah, another thing that to me, he's much more than just mere entertainment. In a lot of ways, he's kind of a teacher, I guess, to me.
He is.
That's
why I really enjoy watching his interviews.
Yeah, gosh, he's so... I love his personality. It's so cool.
Did you know that William Hurt was offered the role of the Mantle Twins? But he wanted to play it, but he had a scheduling conflict. So, he does return for Cronenberg in that classic role in History of Violence.
Sure.
But I can imagine Cronenberg would have been a huge fan of Kiss of the Spider Woman
and Altered States.
Yeah.
You saw Kiss of the Spider Woman for the first time with me, which was really special, because I saw that when I was quite young as well, and there's something I really love about that film. And
guess who else was offered the role?
Who?
Robert De Niro, which would have been very weird. I don't think that
would have worked.
And he turned.
No, you needed like very elegant English. They were very proper.
Yeah.
Well, in some regards. No, and
but were the real ones British? I don't think they were.
They were just from a very very wealthy family, so they probably did kind of. I think they did kind of talk like that.
I think William Hurt would have been quite.
He could have done it, but I still think the willowy figure of Jeremy Irons.
That's perfect.
And his cheekbones, and just the sort of you see it again in Lolita. He's just perfect for those kind of roles.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were quite like, they were snobs. People straight up said that in real life these twins were snobs, and in the film these guys are snobs.
I think a lot of doctors are.
Probably. Especially ones from wealthy families.
But De Niro, the reason he turned it down was he felt uncomfortable playing a gynecologist. So funny.
That is so interesting. He's happy to play the devil and things like that, but not a gynecologist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, William Hurt would have been pretty cool, but Jeremy Irons is the man for that film.
And this is the first film with Peter Suschitzky, the brilliant cinematographer.
The cinematography is just, it's subtle, so you don't notice it all the time, but it's just gorgeous.
I'm noticing it all the time. Okay.
Well, I like how, like, sometimes cinematography, I'm like so aware of the camera, which is cool, but like with this, I'm just like, it was very immersive. Yeah. Very, very beautiful.
So this is a film I'd definitely give 5 out of 5.
Yeah, me too. It's so sad and tragic yet beautiful, and it's 5 out of 5 hearts for both of us. So that gives us 10 out of 10 hearts for Dead Ringers.
Next up is Naked Lunch. My first exposure to Cronenberg.
Wow.
And I do love it,
but I don't love first as well. Maybe. Possibly, because I was really into Burroughs.
Okay.
I can't remember how I got into it, but wow, it is so Burroughs. Yeah. He nailed it. Burroughs was alive when it was made.
Yeah.
So
I think he liked the film.
Better. Yeah. I thought it was very like.
He didn't. I don't think he had the same response to his film being made as J.G. Ballard, who, with Crash, said that he thought that the film was even better than the book. Like Burroughs just liked the film, but that was all. He was quite old at this time.
Yeah, it's got like talking typewriters and typewriters that turn into insects, and then there's just like this powder that they like having rubbed on their lips. You know,
there's some powder on my lips.
There's these really creepy, amazing voices that these things have, and there's these creatures that sort of have these sort of mugwumps. But what are they called when like they're almost like. Oh, they're like these fleshy, like tentacle-y like things, but not more, almost like long fingers. I don't know, they're unlike anything I've ever seen, and they sort of ooze these liquid sort of tendrils. It's almost like an sea anemone thing. It's almost like an udder, and that they seep this fluid, and addicts kind of suckle on them. It's like a cow. It's
some brilliant effects.
The effects are crazy. They're absolutely bonkers. But it's a very like. Burroughs is known for his kind of like linear vision, I guess, in a way, but like it unfurls so well.
It's quite a different story to the book, though. I think
it is a little. Yeah.
Cronenberg rewrote it as more of a biographical story.
Yes, that's true. It's more like he's taken from Burroughs' actual
real life. Like Burroughs shot his wife infamously.
The William Tell routine.
Shot her in the head. By accident. Well, we don't know. But
well, they had this routine where she would put an apple on her head, and he'd shoot it. But he was always off his gourd on like all kinds of crazy drugs.
Mainly opiates.
But he'd do like speedballs and all sorts of kilos and mix things up together, and so that was.
Did you know that he shot his wife, and he only went to jail in a Mexican prison for 13 days for killing his wife?
Yeah, because it was an accident.
Yeah.
She's like the epitome of a beard, I guess, like a woman that's with a gay man to sort of help cover for him.
Well, actually, that's funny you say that, because Paul Bowles and Jane Bowles, who are portrayed in the film by Ian Holm and Judy Davis, not Judy Davis. Yeah, is it? Yes, they're I think. Anyway, they were, what do you call them? A beard.
Really? Like a married
in real
couple
life,
that was covering up for the gayness?
Yeah.
Ian Holm was gay?
They were both, well, and no, the real people that they're based on. Jane Bowles and Paul Bowles, who are also writers. He's that other writer in Tangier who swaps typewriters with him. Yeah. So they were gay, and him and his wife were gay in real life.
So both gay?
Yeah.
That works really well for both of them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think actually Burroughs was probably a little bit bisexual at least. I don't think he was totally
he definitely was.
Sex with women, but crazy though. I mean, consenting to a parlor trick like that with drug addicts was like kind of like a choice. Yep. That's for sure. Yeah, but there is that deeply autobiographical element that's not as present in the novel.
I think she was a bit of a user too, so she.
She was a big drug user.
So she would have also that would have played into her choosing to let that happen.
Yeah, their judgment was a little bit impaired.
So great performance by Peter Weller in this film, who obviously was in RoboCop.
He's so good as Burroughs.
Some other genre films like horrors like Leviathan and Screamers as well.
And of course RoboCop.
Yeah.
He's the RoboCop. He's so good. I love his face. He looks, I don't know, he just almost looks like not quite human. He's
Yeah,
such
very
an interesting face. Very kind of beautiful in a very like chiseled, weird sort of way. But his kind of like monotone, super laid back sort of performance is just mesmerizing. He's so perfect. And Ian Holm's one of my favorite actors. So seeing him in that was making me very happy as well.
You'll know him from Alien, From Hell, and Existence, which he comes back.
In Brazil, has anyone seen Sam Lowry? He's just so, I love him so much. I was very sad when he died.
Judy Davis was good in the film as well. She's apparently was quite difficult.
Yeah, the difficult one.
Or still is, maybe. I don't know. She sounds like quite an unusual person in real life.
She's a very cool actress, though.
Yeah.
Very cool. I really enjoy her.
Yeah. Great score by Howard Shore, but it's also a collaboration with Ornette Coleman, who's probably one of my favourite jazz musicians.
And he was part of that whole scene with Burroughs and Ginsberg and all of that, wasn't he?
He was.
So that was just so perfect. You couldn't have had this film without that sort of jazz vibe going on. It wouldn't have been.
Because I mean, the whole beat thing in the 50s, they were listening to a lot of jazz and early free jazz like that as well. I was very lucky to have spoken to Ornette Coleman on the phone for about half an hour. I was very nervous because he was, at that time especially, it was like all I listened to, so it was very exciting. And this film is produced by Jeremy Thomas, who's one of these sort of legendary producers that lets directors do what they want to do because he loves their work.
And so it's a really good expression of all the things that Cronenberg wants to do and he got to do. Wow. There's some scenes that just live rent free in my head and they're like centipede type creatures. It's just so good.
He also produced Crash, which obviously,
that makes sense. Bless you, dude. What's his name?
Jeremy Thomas.
Jeremy Thomas. Thank you. Are you still alive, Jeremy Thomas?
Yeah, he is.
Thank you.
I think so.
Thanks for
He
helping.
produced Only Lovers Left Alive, but he also directed that film with Christian Bale that we watched with him and John Hurt. You know, the very young Christian Bale.
That was really good.
Yeah, all the little animals, I think.
All the little animals. Yeah, that was an interesting film.
Yeah, it was.
I kind of loved it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's thank you very much. Without you, this wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, sadly.
So that's all I've got to say. What would you give that?
Ooh,
It's not one of my. It's not like a pure Cronenberg film, because it's sort of quite a messy sort of film in a lot of ways. So I don't. It's not like Crash, Videodrome, Dead Ringers extends for me.
I'd still give it like a 4 to 4.5.
Yeah, I'd probably give it a 4 for me.
Yeah, I think about 8.5.
3.59 or something.
Yeah. So around about 8 out of 10 hearts, I think, for that. Because it's not perfect, but I just love it. It's just so beautifully weird and nothing else like it, which I always appreciate.
Very special experience watching it.
Indeed.
And so after this, he did a film called M. Butterfly.
Yeah, we're just not going to really talk about it because we haven't watched it for a long time. It's very different from his other stuff.
But we should mention the other films.
Yeah, we're just going to mention he did that.
That's got another great performance by Jeremy Irons as well. So it does sort of relate.
It's a great film. Really great. And I want to watch it again, but we just ran out of time.
It's more of a drama sort of film. But after that is Crash. So we're definitely talking about that because that is definitely related to Crimes of the Future as well. Yeah. I mean, they were just alone, and Cronenberg himself was predicting there were going to be walkouts and stuff with the new film. I wasn't actually as full on as I thought in that regard. I mean, he said the last 20 minutes will definitely get walkouts. And I think there were some, just because people are like a bit afraid of their imaginations in a lot of ways. But
and death.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's scary.
Yeah, exactly. But but no, Crash. Yeah, it does have things in common with it. What would you say? Commonalities. I'm like
it's the
overloaded in my mind.
atmosphere. I think a lot of it is the atmosphere. A lot of it is the obsession with the body, with scars, with things that are broken.
The performance art thing is a big factor because they have these in Crash they have like special events at night time where they meet up and they'll reenact sort of famous car crashes.
Yeah.
And that's quite similar to Crimes of the Future in a way.
It's such a cold film, but it's so the characters are so detached and kind of, could say maybe traumatized in a way, but some of them are quite like sociopathic, so maybe they're already like that. It's just so interesting, and it's got the way that it looks. It's just so
I love
sleek.
the look very much.
Yeah, like
the obsession with I've forgotten the exact words he used, but the obsession with the perversion of the kind of advancing the human body, like distortion of the human body. That's something. There's not distortion, but it was some word like that. There's a piece of dialogue in Crash.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that is almost exactly the same in Crimes of the Future.
And the characters are all pretty much addicted to sex, like compulsively having sex with each other.
Which Cronenberg didn't want it to be. He didn't want people to be aroused. He thought that it was erotic. Sure, it was sexual, but it's not like, like a lot of. At the time Crash came out, a lot of people were saying it was pornographic, but it wasn't pornographic.
No, I wouldn't describe it like that.
It wasn't. He didn't do it with the intention of getting people off.
No, I don't. Yeah, not at all.
I mean,
it's quite sad, really, the way that they're all sort of with each other in a way. Like
the dear old British film, what are they? Censors Board or whatever they're called. They wanted to ban it. The Daily Mail, a rag, the Daily Mail, they wanted it to get banned, so they kind of conspired with the censors and tried to help them to get it censored, but they actually got in like 15 people who had been in car accidents who were like, like similar to, I guess,
disabled or like
people.
Wounded or physically impacted by a car.
And they showed them the film and said, "Does that offend you?" And it didn't, so they couldn't ban it.
They couldn't ban it.
It's though it was banned in a suburb of London, Westminster or something. So to this day, I think, which is crazy.
That's where the most pearl clutching happens, in Westminster, England, apparently. But I love that they got people in who were impacted by that. And they're like, "Aren't you offended?" And they're like, "No, actually, this is kind of amazing and great."
And this has like Crimes of the Future, this has a really great ensemble cast as well. We have James Spader, who plays James Ballard, J.G. Ballard, and Elias Koteas is this great figure, shadowy figure named Vaughn.
Amazing.
Yeah, he's very
just smoulders.
One of the great characters in film, I think.
What a character.
Deborah Kara Unger, who had studied and has a PhD as a philosopher.
She's the one with the cat-like eyes.
Yeah.
She's such an interesting looking woman. I'm very wow, her presence is something else. She's also in The Game with David Fincher.
I reckon
good.
he must have seen Crash and really liked her in that because The Game is like 1 year later.
Oh, I loved her. She's so cold. They're all quite cold, but her in particular, it's amazing.
And Holly Hunter was in this, and she actually had been lobbying Cronenberg for years to be in one of his films, which
good lady.
She's got really interesting taste, and I'm glad that she finally got to work with him.
She's great.
And Rosanna Arquette.
She's got such sex appeal. It's just insane.
Yeah.
And it's really well utilized in this film. Yeah.
And Ballard, J.G. Ballard, I'm a huge fan of this book. In fact, it's could even be my favourite book of all time.
I haven't finished it, but I was blown away with like the sort of cold, detached, clinical way of sort of observing these very heated, erotic moments. But the way he just writes
very poetic in its own way. It is
so
poetry.
Interesting. I can't wait to finish it. Actually, it's such an interesting book. I've never read anything quite like it.
Yeah.
Really, really, really interesting book. And to translate it so well into a film, it's no easy task.
The French philosopher, postmodern philosopher Jean Baudrillard, he loved this book, and he called it the first great novel of the universe of simulation, because he's known for simulation and simulacra.
Wow, Oh,
So
cool.
in that book, he wrote an essay on Crash.
I can't wait to read that.
It's only a few pages. It's very worth. You should read it before you read the book
I
again.
do, yeah.
But yeah, I
Finish that. But I'm always
love this
finishing,
book.
like starting all these amazing books and then getting distracted. That's the one thing for ADHD. Not meant.
Mm.
Gonna finish it because I loved it. Love what I read of it.
The score is so gorgeous. It's, I mean, it
We listened
mirrors
to
that.
Sorry. We listen to a lot of these scores like all the
Yeah.
time. We should mention
I listen to them.
Dead
heaps.
Ringers and Crash.
I always have them on my phone.
Yeah.
But yeah, Crash soundtrack is yeah, it's a very, very special one to me. I introduced Mika Levy to it, who's a really great soundtrack composer. I mean, she'd heard of it, but she hadn't. Well, I guess I can't say introduced her to it, but I was in LA and I'd bought all these CDs back when I actually bought physical things, and I went to a DJ gig that she was at, and then went out afterwards with her and her bandmates drinking, and yeah,
so jealous of
she
her,
she had
She's
a,
so cool.
she's very cool, and
She's so cool.
she looked through them, and that was the one that she sort of picked out and said that she's been meaning to listen to it, and I was sort of raving about how amazing it is. So yeah, it's very special. It's quite different to Howard Shore's other scores, in that it uses electric guitars as well, which gives it that really icy cold sound. But yeah, it's beautiful. Very minor key, which most of his scores are. I mean, Dead Ringers is the one that really has these major key bits at the start of the film that, like you say, disintegrate over time and become more minor key. But yeah, Crash is probably my favourite score of his. I love it.
Such a cool movie. Once again, one of those big movies that made me like not only accept but embrace my scars and look at things very differently. Don't worry, I don't want to get into car crashes. The one fatal car, I didn't die, but my friend did. One car accident. Car accidents are like the scariest thing ever. But I still wasn't offended by this movie. In fact, it kind of helped me reclaim myself after that horrendous experience. I certainly don't derive any like the idea of sexual satisfaction about crashes or seeing crashes, but I like looking at them in a different way, and it did help me move on from the trauma of that car accident. That's seriously the most crazy, scary things. Like, it's just the way that the metal.
Very fast.
We're so flimsy and fleshy, and cars are so hard, but they crumble. They just crumble like nothing else. And yeah, certainly drive carefully, folks, because you don't want to be in a car accident.
One other thing I just remembered that this has in common with Crimes of the Future is the medical tattoos.
Yes.
There's some really interesting tattooing going on in Crash.
Yeah,
as well.
liases and
Very ugly sort of tattooing.
Ugly but beautiful too.
In its own way, yeah.
In its own way, yeah.
Cronenberg's agent at the time begged Cronenberg to think instead about directing a film called The Juror, which ended up being directed by Joel Schumacher. It's very cliche kind of courtroom drama, which he had been offered, but as he thought that would ruin Cronenberg's career. Probably he thought it would ruin his own career, but Cronenberg went ahead, of course, with Crash and fired his agent, as he should have.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and there's sort of a calm myth as well. I mean, we've even been saying, you know, there were going to be walkouts with Crimes of the Future. I think that it's just a bit of a marketing ploy to like get people excited about it. But I'd always thought, yeah, okay, they've talked about all these walkouts at Cannes for the Crash thing, and the Cannes Crash press conference was legendary, and all these sort of arguments and heated discussions. But then they finally, last year I think it was, made the Cannes press conference for Crash available as a bonus feature on the Crash Blu-ray, and it's actually quite tame. There's no arguments or anything like that. Everyone's very respectful, and very sort of intelligent discussions, and
it was very, very polite actually.
Yeah, I was so surprised. So yeah, look that up. It's pretty interesting.
I'm starting to get uncomfortable, but I'll do my best. I'm going to power through.
We don't have that much. We've got one more video to go. But yeah, and Scorsese again said that this film was his 8th favourite film of the 90s.
8th favourite? That's very specific.
Well, this was in his top 10.
Okay.
He gave, top 10. And it was voted the number one movie of 1996 by Cahiers du Cinéma, who are a French, really good sort of French journal that has been going since the 40s or something, maybe even earlier. France is always ahead of the curve.
They are.
As far as film goes.
Yeah. They get it. They know what's up.
Yeah. So we should stop this one.
But have we rated it yet?
No, for me it's obvious. It's like a 10 out of 10.
It's 10 out of 10 hearts. Like, how could it not be?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So we see you soon for Existence.
See you for the next one.
Long live the new flesh.
Long live it forever.